Well, thank y'all so much. It is great to be here again with you. How many of you were at the morning session? Everyone? Was there anyone that was not at the morning session? Is there anyone that doesn't understand the questions so far? No, it's great to be here. This is going to be completely impromptu, a little bit different than this morning because it's a little less structured. A lot of times I like to hear where everyone else is at and let that dictate the conversations and where we lead with the different topics. So with that being said, when I realized that what I was seeing through telescopes at 16 years old was showing this grandeur in space, and then I realized that the fossils that I was picking up at 8 years old and 9 years old, it was revealing information about the history of the world. And then, when I went to Israel and I picked up a piece of pottery, I realized that, archaeology is showing that there is a consistency to what maybe we've read in our Bibles all along. And then I go to the Grand Canyon and I hike all the way down through the canyon and I look at the layers, and every rock strata is telling us a story. And we could go on and on and on. We talked this morning a little bit about biology and genetics and how even the biology inside each and every one of us is painting this picture, a picture of design, God's fingerprints of design. And so what I wanted to do is maybe kind of focus in for just a couple of minutes on a few of the animals that I have had the privilege of being able to study and talk about over the last few years, and then basically open it up for questions. And we could go to astronomy or biology or geology or paleontology or genetics or microbiology, wherever it takes us. I just want to see where it goes. So, first creature. Does anyone know what this is? Lightning, but good guess, because it's exact same shape, but it's actually known as the bombardier beetle. Now, how many of you have heard of the bombardier beetle? One, two. We actually have a false bombardier beetle in Tennessee. I've seen some in my backyard before. They're not the real thing, but the real things can be found in Oklahoma and Texas and all over the country. The bombardier beetle is pretty amazing, because if it feels threatened by, let's just say, a spider or an ant that comes to attack it, the ant or the spider could be coming up towards its back legs or its front or anywhere around this little beetle. The beetle's about that long, about that big, really small thing. And this ant comes up to attack it. But the bombardier beetle has these chambers inside of its abdomen, multiple chambers. And it has two different chemical components in these multiple chambers. Now, it just so happens that these two chemical components start a chain reaction when put together, kind of like fire and gasoline, right? It's going to create some type of an explosion if those two chemicals come together. Well, it just so happens that whenever the beetle feels threatened, it can make those two components, those two chemicals, come together into a tertiary mixing chamber. And so all of a sudden it starts this chemical reaction where it's building up pressure and it's creating this steam, this basically explosion inside of itself. And it's about to explode, but it has a cannon in its backside that it can actually aim. And if you were to slow this thing down, and we've done this, slow it down to like 960 frames per second, and take a video of this happening, what you see is that it aims that cannon very precisely towards whatever is attacking it. It doesn't matter what direction the attacker is coming from. And in slow motion, it goes like a machine gun. Scalding hot steam at whatever is attacking it. And it repels the attacker. So the bombardier beetle basically has a cannon in its rear end that it can bombard whatever is attacking it. Now, this brings up a few curious questions. Because I'm thinking, okay, from an engineering perspective and from a design perspective and from a basic biology perspective, what if it didn't have two chambers but instead had one? And those two chemicals existed in that one chamber. Boom, the beetle would explode. Ooh, dead beetle. All right, well, let's think about this another way. What if the beetle had the two different chemicals in two different chambers and had a mixing chamber that it could squirt it into to start the chemical reaction, but it didn't have an expulsion device, a cannon? Boom, the beetle explodes. Dead beetle. What if this, and we could go on and on and on with the what ifs, right? What if it didn't have a defense mechanism and this beetle was entirely vulnerable to whatever was attacking it? Well, dead beetle. Any way you cut it, you've got a dead beetle, except for the way that it works, except for the way that it's designed. Okay, so how does this happen over random chance and over massive amounts of time if you don't have all of those? Let's just say that this beetle evolved from a smaller organism, something that was a proto-beetle, and it had everything it needed except for the nozzle on the cannon that allowed it to aim the cannon. Well, then there would be no way to get rid of that excess gas and the steam that it's making, and the beetle would again explode. So what if the beetle could somehow will itself to evolve such a feature in only 1 month's time? That's really short. Well, the first time that it builds up that pressure, it explodes, dead beetle. I guess here's the point. It appears that the beetle, the bombardier beetle that we see on the screen, was designed, engineered from the first moment of its existence with all of the features that it would need, not just to survive. You know, that's a word that we love to use in nature documentaries. Oh, it's built for survival. You know, the instincts of this allows it to survive. And survival is stated again and again and again throughout all these documentaries and throughout all of these nature programs. And anytime you open up a book about a creature like the bombardier beetle and you see all of this verbiage about survival. No, the bombardier beetle is not just built to survive. It's built to thrive. That's an important distinction. We don't often make that distinction, but when we look at the natural world, the world around us, all of the different animal kinds, what we see is that they all appear perfectly built, not just to survive, but to thrive. Well, same thing holds true to you and me. Every one of us sitting here right now, we're built not just to survive this world, but to thrive. The Lord's given us all of these tools that we need. He's given us the ability to explore His world. He's even given us the ability to use the knowledge that we have to make the world a better place. And I think that's pretty special. But those are lessons from a simple beetle, a tiny, tiny little creature. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of animals in my line of work, in documentaries and television shows and other experiences over the years. This was up in British Columbia, Canada, and they said, "David, do you want to film with a bald eagle?" And I said, "That would be great. Yeah, I mean, that would be legendary." And so they're throwing its salmon down on the ground, and the beetle is, the eagle is picking that salmon so fast. As soon as the salmon is thrown down on the ground, boom, it's gone. And they said, "All right, David, so now here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you get really close to the bald eagle, and we want you to talk about it." Did you know that the bald eagle is a symbol of liberty, isn't it? Why is it a symbol of liberty? You know, actually, it wasn't always a symbol of liberty. Benjamin Franklin thought that the turkey would probably be a better symbol for America than the eagle. You know why? Because bald eagles have bad moral character. They're basically these raptors that, again, will kill everything they see and snatch it up. And for that reason, because they're so fast and so ferocious when they need to be, those talons are so sharp that they can rip right through your flesh. The people with the eagles, they said, okay, David, you're going to need to wear a cap and sunglasses. I'm like, well, that's not going to look really good on camera. They're like, no, you want the sunglasses, because without the sunglasses, the eagle could pick your eyes out before you even knew it. It's like, okay, I'm putting on the sunglasses. I got this, yeah. And so the eagle reminds us not only as a symbol of America, but it also reminds us that, hey, there is such a thing as bad moral character. And that brings up this overarching issue of where morality comes from in the first place. How do we actually tell somebody what's bad or good moral character? How do you know what's right or wrong? If truth is objective, if it's whatever we feel today, oh, that's my truth, but it's not your truth. Well, then why couldn't I say, well, it's my truth that I don't like you, and I think that you should be gone from this planet. That's my truth today, and my truth is always correct because it's my truth. No. There is such a thing as right and wrong. And yet throughout civilization, we see this manipulation of right and wrong. And oftentimes it comes from a rejection of biblical or Christian principles. And so what do we have to do to say that, hey, I think that murder is okay for me? Or, hey, I think that lying is all right? Or hey, you have to reject what? The Ten Commandments. Isn't that where we find those basic principles? You know, we all say the golden rule, do unto others. But what is the golden rule? Oh, wait a second. Jesus actually made the golden rule. He's like, you know, you've got 10 commandments here, but you could even boil those 10 commandments down to 2 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor like you do yourself. If we love our neighbor like we do ourselves, I love myself enough not to say I want to lie to myself. So why would I lie to my neighbor if I'm loving them like I love myself? That's basically the golden rule in a nutshell, and it all goes back to 10 commandments that were written in stone on Mount Sinai, an actual event that took place where the Israelites were traveling through the wilderness and came upon a mountain, a sacred mountain where these laws were given. But today, it's easy for us to say, I choose for myself what I want to believe, what's right, what's wrong, what morality really is. And then you say, well, what about the justice system in America today? You know, we punish murderers. Well, it's a good thing, but why do we punish murderers? If we're nothing more than an animal, like the beetle or the eagle, do we ever get onto the eagle for snatching up the salmon and eating it? No. Do we ever get on to the lion for jumping after an impala and killing it? No. So why do we get on to one human for killing another human unless we are not animals? Now here's where it gets really deep, because I love animals. I mean, I've got Topaz is my dog. Topaz is a blue heeler. She's an Australian cattle dog. Australian cattle dogs were invented in 1840. I don't know if I've got a picture of her in here. They were invented in 1840 when an Australian cattle farmer bred his cattle dog with a wild dingo, the wild dogs of Australia. And that's what came out. And they're pretty energetic, I'll have to say. You obviously had an experience with one. And so it took her years to mellow out. Somebody had dropped her off the side of the road. They didn't care for her. She was too energetic. I fed her, and she has followed me for 13, 14 years now. And just the most dear thing to me. I love animals, but we're not an animal. There's just no other way to put it. Are we mammals? Yes, because we have mammary glands. But we're not animals. There is something very specific that separates us from the animal kingdom. And that very specific thing is actually found in a biblical principle called imago Dei, that we are created in the image of God. So the animals were created, and God said, well, that's very good. Behold, they're very good. Everything's very good. But they still weren't mankind. And then God said, well, let's make man in our image, in our likeness. And that is where we come from. So we're separated from the animals. No ape sits around philosophizing about their existence. You see, we're different. But at the same time, we were given dominion over the world around us, over the plants and the trees and the animals and everything around us. That's called the dominion mandate, and that was given in the book of Genesis. And so that's where a lot of times people say, yeah, but Christian organizations, they could care less about the environment. They believe, we've been given dominion over everything, so therefore you just abuse. No, dominion doesn't mean you abuse. Dominion means that you can use to your advantage, but because you're given charge over it, what do? In your businesses, in your organizations, what do you do when you're given charge over something? Do you abuse it? Do you run it into the ground? Do you try to destroy it? Do you just use it all up? No, if you're given charge of something, it means that you nurture it, that you protect it, that you use it to your advantage in business, in daily life, in ministry, in my case, whatever the situation may be, but you are actually going to protect it and hold it near and dear and love it. And that's what we should be doing to the environment all around us. We should enjoy it, study it, use it to our advantage, whether it's fossil fuels or whether it's the trees that make the paper that put these labels together, or whether it is the beautiful dead chicken that I had for lunch. You can enjoy those things, but you're not going to abuse the situation. And that's what the dominion mandate is all about. But where does the dominion mandate come from? It comes from biblical principles. So every time we talk about morality and what's right and wrong, what's right for our world or our environment, what's wrong, what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing, we're going back to biblical principles. And I think that that's something that's often overlooked and something that we can learn from. I've had a lot of opportunities to work with a lot of different creatures, including caiman alligators. This is at the museum. This is at the Wonder Center down in Nashville. And you can see I'm holding a caiman, no rubber bands, scary. I was holding it very tight. The thing could have taken my finger off had it turned around. But right behind it, you'll notice that there is something larger. So that's called a Deinosuchus. And a Deinosuchus is a super croc that we find in places like Oklahoma. Those things were twice as large as the largest saltwater crocodiles that we find today. And we find them in the fossil record. They are the largest crocodilians. So caiman would be smallest crocodilians. Deinosuchus behind it, which you can't see the whole thing, a child would fit in the mouth of this thing easily. It's a massive creature, is the largest crocodilian that we know of. So it's interesting that we can see scale comparisons within the animal kingdom. And then in Africa, I had the opportunity to do some videos on the monkeys of Africa, and even some of the monkeys not of Africa, because in Africa there's this trend to keep capuchins and other monkeys as pets, and then sometimes people get tired of them. And so non-native monkeys to Africa come to Africa, and then they have to be put in sanctuaries to try to protect them. And so in this case, we had a lot of different types of monkeys jumping on my shoulders, and we were filming with these things and learning about the amazing characteristics. And then I was filming a documentary called Amazing Animals of Alaska. And I love the animals of Alaska. They're just fascinating. And someone said, okay, well, for this film, we want to do a section on grizzly bears. Oh, that's great. I love that. That would be fantastic. We can get some telephoto photos of these grizzly bears at work and catching salmon and, playing with different things. And yeah, but we wanted you to kind of be, a little bit closer to the grizzlies and, really experience it. It'd be better on camera. And that's how this happened. And yeah, little too close. Little too close. That's a 600-pound grizzly bear. That is not AI. That's a real image right there. And you can go to the other session on AI and learn that there are telltale watermarks that no. This is real. And I went out there, And there is you can see there's a fence. It's an extremely large enclosure. But the animal expert said, okay, David, so you're going to film really close to these things. And I'm just going to give you a few pieces of advice. The bear's name is Billy. Now, Billy has been raised since a cub. I think his mother was killed, and so we've raised it. So he's usually pretty nice. Usually doesn't cut it here. They said, but he's still a wild animal. And so there's a few things you should and shouldn't do. You should kind of stand fairly still. You shouldn't try to rub his fur too much, Okay, no problem. I think I can stay away from that. Arm's distance. And his name is Billy, but don't mention his name too much, because if you mention his name too much and say, hey Billy, he may want to play with you. But he's 600 pounds. So if he jumps up and starts to play with you, he could knock you down, or, with those 4 to 6 inch claws, just rip right through you. And I was like, okay. So they bring me into this enclosure, and the camera crew is standing behind an electrified fence. But I'm in with the bear. Okay, so this is a serious situation right here. And I'm like, well, they get to stand out there. Yeah, you have to stand here. And at the end, I always end every media appearance with the heavens declare the glory of God. And so I said, I'm going to end this next section with the grizzly bear with that phrase. And they said, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to give the bear a little hand signal and show him a treat off camera when you say that. And try to get him to do something, unique to show off a little bit. Okay. So I'm in there, and the cameras say, roll, and speed, and audio's good. Okay, go. And so I start talking, and I'm David Rives. I'm here and I'm here with Billy the grizzly bear. And all of a sudden, this 600-pound grizzly bear, the trainer is off camera. The grizzly bear starts walking towards me. The trainer's kind of pulling him in that direction. And this bear comes and sits down right next to me. And I'm talking along, trying to talk about the design of this bear and how beautiful it is and all of that. And then all of a sudden, the bear turns over, and in my microphone, in the microphone on my lapel, you can hear him breathing in my neck. And I'm trying to maintain composure here. Do you know how hard it is to stare at a camera when there's a 600-pound bear right next to you? It's like, and we get through the whole thing. I get to the very end, and I say, I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. And at that point, this bear stands up and stares me straight in the eye for that final second. And I made it out unscathed. I'm here to tell the tale. But these kind of things are maybe a little unusual for most people. Most people don't have these types of experiences, and a lot of people would say, "Yeah, David, because you're crazy. That's the reason most people don't have these experiences." But at the same time, I'm so enthralled with all of these different animals and the stories that they have to tell that it's just exciting to me to be able to share them with others. I've been with giraffes. I've held the tails of lions in the African bushveld. I've been in open-air game vehicles when lions come out of the bush so unexpectedly and sit right in front of our vehicles with the sun shining through their manes. And I was able to capture this image probably on the last African photo safari that I led. Just stunning. And you can even see the scars on its nose where he's been fighting. He's got that young mane coming in. So this is a young male lion, and he's just kind of getting those battle scars as he fights for his territory. Incredible creatures. And this is the southern hemisphere Milky Way. So you're peering into the core of the Milky Way galaxy down on the bushvelds of South Africa, and you can see the Southern Cross. It's hard to see. There's so many stars in here, it's hard to point out. But you see this purple spot right here? That's actually a nebula. Nebula is Latin for cloud, so it's a cloud of dust and gas in space, and it's so bright that I could see it just with my regular camera taking a photo beyond our camp in Africa, and there's a supernova in there, an exploding star that you can still see to this day. It's this big remnant of gas where the star exploded. This is a beautiful situation. And then we sometimes play memory games with elephants. So I try to do an elephant encounter with elephants that have either been abused or neglected or whatever it might be, and introduce people to the amazing African elephant. Because if you've seen an elephant like in a circus or on TV, usually it's an Asian elephant. And you say, whoa, that's a big creature. African elephants are massive. I've ridden on the backs of these things before, and even beyond the open air game vehicles that you're on the top of, when you're on top of an elephant, you're like, whoa, there's a herd of zebra in the distance. Whoa, I can see forever. There's giraffe over there. It's an amazing experience. But elephants have good memories. You've heard they have good memories? We actually test that every now and then. So sometimes we do memory games with some of the elephants. For instance, one elephant's name is Messina. And Messina, she actually is able to play a game with us. So what I do is I say, could I have your ball cap and your ball cap? And let me take your scarf or whatever. And I go around about 5 different times, 5 different people, pick items from them, and say, okay, well, this is Tom's ball cap. Throw it on the ground. Okay, well, this is Susie's cap. Well, let's throw it on the ground. And so forth and so on, 5 times. Then we turn the elephant around. And then I tell everybody, okay, y'all move positions. Everybody swap places. So we all swap places, and then we turn the elephant back around. And we say, give Susie back her cap. So the elephant reaches with its trunk, picks up the cap, and places it right in Susie's hand. We do that 5 times in a row. Now, it's short-term memory, but it has memorized the names of every single person in that situation. And so it's a really amazing situation. We usually get close to African painted dogs or wild dogs. And perhaps I love the birds of South Africa. So I'll just tell you one story about this bird, and then I want to start opening it up to Q&A. So be thinking, any question about animals, biology, geology, astronomy, paleontology, dinosaurs, whatever if it's science, be thinking of the question. We're going to open it up in just a second. This is called the go-away bird. And my first experience with a go-away bird in Africa, I was sitting really still. I had a guide next to me. We were both very quiet. We were watching a warthog drink from a watering fountain in the distance. And sitting there in the stillness of the African bushveld, I hear something behind me. And this voice says, "Go away." And I was like, what is that? And then I heard it again, "Go away." And I turned to my guide and I'm like, does somebody not want us here? Like, what's going on? What is going? And he says, no, this is the gray lory or the go-away bird. And when it spots a hunter or when it spots a predator or when it spots a human or when it spots anything dangerous or that it doesn't like, you can see it's got its mouth open right now. It tries to warn the rest of the bushveld. It's telling the rest of the bushveld that there might be danger nearby. And so it gives its call, "Go away. Go away." And that was my first, I had no idea. And of course, most of them they speak native tongues. I had no idea they spoke English either. But I've had a lot of experiences in around the world, in Africa, around the world. I've had the experience to interact with cheetahs up close and personal. And again, those are all stories that we could talk about forever. But all of these animals, everything that I've ever studied, everything that I've ever seen, has its own unique story. And it has its own unique design features. I'll give you one design feature. You know what these are called? They're called malar stripes. They're dark tear-like stripes running from the corner of their eye, down their cheek, and then over to the corner of their mouth. They're found on cheetahs. But there's another creature that looks a little bit like a cheetah that they're not found on. What do you think it might be? Can anybody guess? Leopard, yes, which is a type of cat, so both correct. They're not found on leopards. Leopards hunt primarily at nighttime. And they don't have the malar stripe, even though they have the spots and even though they're big cats and all of the similarities, there is that dissimilarity. They don't have the malar stripe. Why not? Well, you see, the cheetah hunts many times. I've been in open-air game vehicles driving through the bushveld, and you'll see a cheetah stalking a wildebeest just after daylight when the sun is shining through the trees. Okay, so let me ask you a question. When we have these sports events and these incredible athletes that want to get rid of the glare from the studio lights, from the stadium lights, what do? They put a dark stripe right on their cheek right there, and it absorbs the stadium lights so that it doesn't bounce back into their eyes and make them have to squint to see. Well, wait a second. The cheetah, different from the leopard in that the cheetah many times hunts on those early morning or late afternoon hours, needs to be able to have a pair of sunglasses to not reflect the light back in their eyes. And guess what it is provided with? A natural pair of sunglasses, a malar stripe that appears perfectly suited for everything that the cheetah does. We find that in every situation, no matter how far we look, in whatever creature we look, from the smallest all the way to the largest, there are these design patterns, these engineering patterns that are pointing back to the design of these creatures, not to some accident that happened, but instead to something that was built, designed, not just to survive, but to thrive. Let's take a few questions. We can go anywhere you want to go with this. Any scientific principle. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
What's the purpose of blood-sucking ticks?
The purpose of blood-sucking. That's a great question. What is the purpose of blood-sucking ticks? It's a great question. Okay, so blood-sucking ticks now transmit diseases, but if you go back in early history, you find that there were much less mutations and much less disease. So in the beginning, God created everything perfect, right? He said, everything is very good. So even if you have a tick that goes from creature to creature, it could be actually spreading something positive, and over time, that has turned to negative. Now, we don't know the exact purpose for blood-sucking ticks, but they didn't always used to transmit diseases, and they didn't always used to be harmful. It could, just like pollination in flowers, it could have been originally a beneficial component to nature that was symbiotic or showed mutualism, that actually benefited the different creatures that the tick went to. Yeah. We don't know the exact, it's a great question, and I don't know the exact answer, but there is enough science behind it to show that it could indeed have a benefit, or at least not a negative effect. Yeah. Other questions?
So we know animals don't have souls, or Jesus we would be spreading the gospel to them. Do they have spirits?
Oh, great question, because, okay, and everybody heard this, right? We know animals don't have souls, or Jesus would have spread the gospel to them, but do they have spirits? It's interesting that in the creation account in Genesis, you find this Hebrew word used, nephesh. Nephesh. And nephesh appears to be the like a spirit, or it's hard to define exactly what it is, but it's something. It's the breath of life inside every creature. And it's interesting now that you never see that word nephesh used in relation to ants or insects or things like that. It's always in relation to, other animals like mammals, and also it's used in humans as well. So it appears that they do have something, whether it's a spirit in the same sense, or whether it's just like the breath of life, something special that God has placed in them, they do have something like that. And, to that, on that line of questioning, the next question is, well, will we see our favorite pets in heaven? Yeah. There's definitely animals up there. That's all I can say from a biblical perspective. I can't say if you're going to see, Tommy the Tomcat up in heaven. No, but I know that there's animals up there, and I know that the Lord loves animals. And is it possible that we will see our pets up there? Well, you know what? The Lord wants to have a relationship with us, and He loves us. And is it possible that He could even give us the opportunity of seeing a pet that we saw on earth? There's a possibility, but we don't know. There's no biblical response to exactly how that plays out. Yeah. Great question, though. Any other questions? Yes.
Life outside Earth and the universe.
Yes. Extraterrestrial life. E.T.? Any kind of life. Okay. So let's talk about E.T. for a second. There are over 6,000 extrasolar planets that have been discovered so far in the universe beyond our solar system. So our solar system, obviously, around our sun, planets around our sun. We know of 6,000 planets beyond our sun that are orbiting other suns in our galaxy. We don't know about the ones in the other galaxies. Out of 6,000 so far, none can be confirmed to have the conditions necessary to support life, at least life as we know it. So this brings up a really, really interesting question. Okay, we see headlines all the time. Earth-like planet discovered, orbiting a star, whatever it is, the Death Star, whatever it is, there's an Earth-like planet found all the time, and it pops up on the headlines of our news feeds. Well, one such case was planet Gliese 58b. What a name. Wouldn't you love to live on Gliese 58b? And it was all over the headlines. It said, Earth-like planet discovered. It's probably in the correct habitable zone for life to exist. It probably has liquid water. It probably has a breathable atmosphere. This thing is just a jewel sitting here. It's just perfect. It probably contains extraterrestrial life because, after all, it's basically just like Earth. It's amazing. We've discovered this thing. It's great. And then a few months later, they realized that they misinterpreted a blip of data and there was no planet there, period. That's how bad the media, and O'Leary actually alluded to how bad the media can be when it comes to sensationalizing things. That's how bad it is. They reported a planet that was supposedly Earth-like, that supposedly had everything needed for extraterrestrial life, and they listed all of these things, and then they're like, oops, there wasn't even a planet. Yeah, we were just kidding. But it makes a great story. So, I have a friend who's a mathematician at Oxford University, John Lennox, and he has calculated basically the odds of life on other planets. Because we know of 6,000, and if we know of 6,000, then there's a whole lot more than 6,000 planets out there. So the number of factors that are necessary in order to support life are so vast that John Lennox would say that this is a mathematical improbability. And then you say, well, what does that mean, John? And he would say, well, a mathematical improbability means that it's impossible. The odds are so high that in this universe it's impossible. So is it possible that life could exist outside the universe? It's possible. But is it possible based on mathematical odds? It's so extremely unlikely, mathematically improbable, that in layman's terms, we would call that as impossible. And as there's the possibility that there's life somewhere out there on another planet as bacteria or something, possibly. But human life specifically. And the reason that it's so rare is because if we look at the Earth, if we look at the universe in all its vastness, it's easy to look at the Earth as kind of small and insignificant. But there are some extraordinary characteristics that enables Earth to exist in a universe that, for the most part, is hostile to life. And so we live about 93 million miles away from the sun, which is trivial. Why should we know how far away we are from the sun? It's actually pretty important because we were just 5% closer. We would be boiling hot and uninhabitable. Well, if you push that to about 10% farther away, and some of my colleagues would say, 5 to 15% farther away, we would be freezing cold. We would be like the planet Mars. We would be freezing and uninhabitable. So you got this Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's just right, just like Goldilocks likes it. So there's this Goldilocks zone where Earth lives in around the sun. And so you say, well, wait a second. If we had a smaller sun, all we have to do is push in the Goldilocks zone closer to the sun, and it would still be the correct temperature for life. True. But if you had a smaller sun, then you would have to push in the Earth so close that it would be locked into synchronous rotation. That's kind of like the moon. You only see one side of the moon, right? So the Earth, the same thing would happen to it, where Earth would be baking with the sun on one side 24/7, and then on the other side it would be darkness and freezing cold. And so it doesn't work either way. And then you say, well, what about our position in the solar system? We've got these planets that are called gas giants, things like Jupiter and Neptune. No, it's not what we ate for lunch. No, these gas giants are composed primarily of hydrogen and helium and all of these other components. And these gas giants are they're always out farther away from the Earth. So you look at the succession, you got the sun, and then you have third rock from the sun. We've got this beautiful little gem. And then you keep going out, and you've got the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and so on and so on. Okay, well, those gas giants act as garbage collectors. And we've actually seen this live and in person. So when cosmic debris comes into the solar system, and it's streaming towards Earth, and that could be really bad. We've all seen the movies where a meteorite crashes into Earth and it never ends up really, really, really good unless somebody goes and saves the day. So if this big piece of cosmic debris is headed in towards the solar system, towards the center of the solar system, towards the Earth, it's getting closer and closer to the Earth, these gas giants have such tremendous gravity that oftentimes they pull the debris in before it gets any closer to Earth. We saw this happen most significantly, was Comet Shoemaker-Levy in 1994. And Comet Shoemaker-Levy is flying through the solar system, and before it gets to Earth, the tremendous gravity of Jupiter pulls that comet in. And as it does, the comet breaks up into 21 different fragments. It collides with the surface of Jupiter, sends a mushroom-shaped cloud of gas 1,000 miles high up into the atmosphere of Jupiter, and causes this massive explosion and eruption. Well, what if that would have hit Earth? We would not have been having this conversation right now. But it just so happens that there appear to be these garbage collectors that are farther out of our solar system that catches debris before it ever comes in. So God's put kind of like a shield. Well, we could take the shield concept one step further because we have a strong geomagnetic field, right? That's what enables our compasses to work. It's what makes basically a magnet work. You've got a magnetic field that goes around the Earth. And what happens is the sun is putting out energy all the time. All right. Now, can you name a few kinds of energy? Energy in the form that the sun puts out. Energy in the form of solar energy, but in the form of what? Heat. Very good. Okay, so you've got energy in the form of heat coming from the sun, and it's important that we have heat on Earth, or else we would all freeze to death. You've got energy in the form of light coming from the sun. Very good. We kind of need light to survive. Photosynthesis is designed to work with light. Okay, so we need light. But then there's a different kind of energy that the sun puts off, and it's harmful radioactive material. It's stuff that we don't need at all. And occasionally bits and pieces of it come into our atmosphere, but most of it is deflected by the geomagnetic field. So God's put a shield around this planet that lets heat and lets light in, but bounces away the harmful types of energy. Coincidence? I don't think so. And then you look at not just our position in the solar system, but the fact that we have a moon that is 1/4 the size of the Earth. Our moon is the largest moon proportionally out of all of the other moons in the entire solar system. Jupiter and Saturn, if you added them all up, have upwards of 200 moons. And yet ours is the largest. We've got one, and we just so happen to have this very weird, completely strange moon compared to anything else out of hundreds of moons in our solar system. Coincidence? It's interesting that because our moon is so large, it actually affects the stability of Earth's axis. It keeps us from going off the rails too much. Our moon is so large that it creates tides. And what do the tides do? The tides circulate the warm and cold waters of the ocean so that it's not boiling hot on the surface of the ocean and freezing cold at the bottom of the ocean. It helps keep everything in the oceans alive. So we got this strange, crazy, weird moon that's out there. And then we realize that, well, wait a second. How many of you have seen a total solar eclipse? In totality. In totality, yes. It's spectacular, isn't it? If you've seen it in totality, you can leave the room right now if you don't think that's spectacular. It's the most astounding, breathtaking thing. I mean, the birds come out, the crickets start chirping. It drops 15 degrees. The star, you could see every star in the sky. It is a moment that will change. It changed my life forever the first time I saw it. And then you say, well, wait a second. Well, this is because, the moon's covering the face of the sun. But out of all the other moons in the solar system, we've got hundreds to choose from. How many are correctly sized for us to see a total solar eclipse if we were on that planet? 0. We have one moon, and it just so happens to be the exact right size. Now, that's not because it's the same size as the sun. No, that would be weird. It's because even though it's 400 times smaller than the sun is 400 times farther away, so proportionally they line perfectly up. And not only do they give us this awesome experience, but they also allow us to examine the surface of the sun and the magnetosphere and all of these other weird things in science that we normally can't see because the sun's too bright. But during a total solar eclipse, the moon is perfectly situated over the bulk of the brightness of the sun, which enables us to be able to see the rest of it and study it. Coincidence? And then you think about our position in our galaxy, the Milky Way, because the center of our galaxy contains a supermassive black hole. What does that mean? That means that anything that gets too close to the event horizon disappears forever. Not even light can escape the gravity of a black hole. You just disappear forever. Okay, do you want to live near a black hole? No, I didn't see any hands raised. Okay, so out on the outer edges of our galaxy, way out here on the farther edge, where the stars start to get less and less, there's something known as elemental deprivation. That means that there aren't enough heavy elements for life to sustain on the outer edges of our galaxy. So if there's not enough heavy elements for the things in this room or the things that you're made of to be sustained, who wants to live on the outer edges of the galaxy? Not one hand. Okay, but in the middle of the arms of the Milky Way galaxy are billions of stars. And occasionally, those stars go supernova. They explode. I've taken photos through observatory-class telescopes of exploding stars, of supernovae. And those are violent events that usually disrupt all of the surrounding stars in the area. So if we lived in the middle of one of those dense pockets of stars, then there's a far greater chance of supernovae, of exploding stars. Who wants to live near a supernova? Not one hand. Guess where we live? In between the Sagittarius and Perseus arms of our galaxy, nestled in between two arms where there's not a high threat of supernova, nestled far enough away from the center black hole of our galaxy that there's no chance we would ever disappear into there, and nestled far enough away from the edges of our galaxy that we don't have to worry about elemental deprivation. In short, we just so happen to be in the perfect spot for life. Coincidence? We could go on for hours. At some point, we have to say, these things are probably not coincidence. They're probably pointing us to something greater.
I have a paleontology question. So I've heard that they'll find like a thigh bone of a dinosaur, and then they reconstruct the entire dinosaur from this bone. How do they do that, and is it accurate? I mean, how do they know it's a thigh bone and not a whatever?
And not a brow horn that actually stuck way out of its head, yes. Great question. I do lead paleo digs. I've dug up bones of massive creatures. Normally, you do find scattered bones. Articulated refers to a dinosaur fully put together, right? Where it's fully articulated. You've got every bone of the dinosaur. And those are rare. We do find them. And we do find them fully articulated. But they're very rare. Normally, you'll find bits and pieces. You'll find, like in Kansas, I'll see this massive creature, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're onto something great. And you find this bone, and this bone, and this bone, and this bone, and then you realize you're on the side of a cliff, and the rest of it has completely broken away. And so you're out of luck in that situation, right? That's typically what we find. But the few times we do find fully articulated, and we have found a lot, they're much rarer, but we found a lot of fully put together dinosaurs and large creatures, enough to note to compare those bones to when we find smaller amounts of the bones, and in order to identify them. So it's actually very good science. We know approximately what they look like. It was a little bit iffy about 50 years ago, 60 years ago, where we had not found enough of them to be able to compare them to the individual bones found in fields. And so sometimes there have been misidentifications, but for the most part, it's fairly accurate when you see a depiction of a dinosaur what the bone structure was, because we have found them mostly articulated, almost all the bones there and in place. And it's interesting that most of the theropod dinosaurs that we find, the three-toed, the terrible dinosaurs like the T-Rex or the Deinosuchus or the Acrocanthosaurus or the raptor, Velociraptor. Most of the time when we find those fully articulated, the whole thing in the fossil record, they're in what's known as the death pose. And you say, okay, well, that sounds very severe. What's the death pose? The death pose is always with its neck bent all the way back, mouth open, gasping for its last breath of air as if it is drowning. Now, there are implications involved that we don't have to go there, but there are implications involved to finding nearly every dinosaur that is fully articulated in this pose. And then there are more implications involved to another thing that has been found within the paleontological community just within the last few years, and it's been published in over 150 scientific papers and journals. And that is, back in 2006, there was a paleontologist by the name of Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her colleague, Dr. Jack Horner. Jack Horner advised on the Jurassic Park movies, extremely famous. But Mary and Jack are digging in the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, and they come across a T-Rex, and the thing is beautiful, and it's well preserved. And they said, okay, we got to get it back to the lab and study it. So they bring in a helicopter, and they're like, okay, we're going to helicopter the femur, the massive leg of this creature, out in a helicopter. They bring a helicopter in, and they realize this bone, this one bone alone, is too heavy for the payload of the helicopter because it's like a big rock now. It's turned to stone. So they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to carefully cut the femur in half. We will separate one half and the other half, helicopter the first half out, then come back, helicopter the second half out, then we'll glue it all back together again. Nobody will know the difference. And it sounded weird. Maybe it would work. It actually worked. But the weird thing about it was that when this giant T-Rex bone was cut in half, Mary started to look inside of it, and she realized that there was some material in there, and she pulled it out and put it under a microscope and rehydrated it, and there were blood vessels, osteocytes, proteins, collagen still inside this dinosaur bone. And it has rocked that's a pun, it's rocked the paleontological community. Because the implications of this is we know collagen will not last 66 plus million years. We know that blood vessels, even if they have to be rehydrated, can't stick around in the middle of a 60 or 70 or 90 million year old bone. And so it's pointing back to this catastrophic burial of dinosaurs, an extinction event that is very, very interestingly, eerily similar to what we read in the biblical account. And that's something super interesting that has happened just within the last few years. And that was just the first. Now it's been brow horns of Triceratops, supposedly 500 million year old worms, Ariops megacephalus, a wide head, broad-faced salamander that was the size of an alligator found in the Texas Permian, supposedly 300 million years old, but it still has soft, pliable, original biomolecules inside of it. And that is so crazy, and it's so exciting because there's so much more that we're going to learn in the next few years, but every bit of it is pointing back to a biblical origin for everything, and I just love that. Can we take how are we doing on time? Okay. 1 minute. We have one question left. I'll be brief, yes.
So do you think man really landed on the moon?
Do I think that man landed on the moon? Perfect ending question. This is great. Yes, I do. That's a great question. We went back a bunch of times. There were many Apollo missions that walked on the moon. And the last Apollo mission, every Apollo mission had to be approved by politicians. Every Apollo mission has to be funded by politicians. And the politicians finally decided, well, these billions of dollars that we used to send y'all up all of these times, well, we could kind of divert all of that spending and maybe we could use it for other political gain. And so that's the reason that the moon landing attempts stopped. But in a rapid order, I'll just tell you this. I'm a skeptic. I need the evidence for everything. I've studied the moon landing. I've studied the photos that were taken. I'm a photographer. That's what I do. I photograph space. I love photography, and I know all of the intricacies of it. And the things that were photographed on the supposed moon landings are legit. And I've spent days with people who walked on the moon. Who said they walked? Let me preface it. Who said they walked on the moon? General Charlie Duke. He's about 89 years old right now. He was on the second to the last moon mission, Apollo 16, and we even have a moon glove on display at the Wonder Center and Science Museum from the last moon mission. But General Duke said, David, and I spent days with him, questioning him, asking him to tell stories, looking for any inconsistencies. I'm like, is it too perfect of a story? Is it not perfect enough of a story? Is it like he doesn't have everything together? Are details changing every time? Or is it too perfect? I spent days with him. And he said, David, let me just be honest with you. He said, I walked on the moon. I don't care if you believe it or not, but I know because I was there. I walked on the moon. And I 100% believe him. But more than that, he told me, he said, David, I went to the moon as an atheist. He said, I was taught for 2 years before I even got on the shuttle before I even got on the rocket to go to the moon. I was taught for 2 years by a secular geologist who told me that the rocks that I would be seeing on the moon just happened, that they coalesced from the moon breaking off from the earth, and that they would be such and such an age, 3.8 billion years old, et cetera, and everything you see is going to be 3.8 billion. He said, I went to the moon as an atheist. I collected moon rock samples. I came back down to earth, and I thought it was really curious that when we sent them back to the lab, they weren't giving the dates that the geologist told me they were going to give. He said, and I thought that was really weird. I was like, so maybe this whole evolutionary thing is bogus after all. But he said, I didn't think much about it. He said, all I know is I was still an atheist. I had a changed experience, but I was still an atheist. And he said, and I still felt like I was missing something. He said, I was like, maybe it's money. So he started a distillery, and he made a whole lot of money. And he said, so now I've accomplished great goals. I've walked on the moon. I have a lot of money. I have a wife that loves me. I've got everything. I still feel like I'm missing something. He said, and so, I decided to try Jesus. He said, and that changed my life forever. He said, but it all started, questions started to appear when I started to walk on the moon and realized that the stories that were being told to me, maybe they were just stories. I'll leave it at that. Thank y'all. And I look forward to spending more time with y'all over the next few days. We can more questions in person, but thanks for letting me share. And Jane, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm enjoying this. This is great. All right, y'all take care.